just arrived in Wrocław. Every time I saw the name of this city, I thought it was Wrocław. No, it's Wrocław. It was only like 3 hours from Krakow, which isn't that bad. I don't know about you guys, but every time I do any form of travel, whether it's in bus or train or anything, it's always quite exhausting. So we're gonna go to our Airbnb first. We're gonna get settled down. We're gonna find some food. We're just gonna take it from there. So right off the bat, it's interesting because I actually feel like I'm back in Ukraine. It doesn't quite feel like Poland for some reason. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, like Poland and Ukraine have a lot of shared history, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But the vibe is much different.
Yeah, I think so.
This is the Airbnb that we're at. Can you believe this Airbnb costs like 70 bucks a night? Look how it is outside. How would you describe how the apartment looks? Like home. The vibe is so interesting. I don't know how I feel. Maybe it's because the weather's like quite kind of gloomy right now. But it's just like a nice little small apartment. I just can't believe it's so expensive. Ooh, they even have like Chinese tea? Jeez. Something that I have to say that's a plus about the city is that there's a lot of nice nature around. If you get out of the main city center, there are some really awesome bike paths. The downside that I seem to be seeing, and maybe my opinion will change on this, Wrocław seems to be a little grimy, kind of a little rough around the edges. Heading into the main area right now, so maybe the downtown area will be a little nicer. Krakow kind of set the expectations super high for me, but I gotta have to see more of the city to really have a full opinion. That seems to be kind of my first impression so far. This museum supposedly is free on Saturdays, so we're gonna go in and check it out to see. What a beautiful building. So yes, this museum is free on Saturdays. Some European museums are just way too overwhelming. There are just so many pieces of art everywhere. There's just so much to look at. And I actually think it's like the perfect size. Everything gets accentuated without it being too much. And now we're all the way in the middle of nowhere. Where the heck are we? And whose fault was it? So one of the things that I've heard about Wrocław before coming here is that they have some of the best Asian food in Poland. For some reason, there's a really big Korean population here. There's some good Chinese food here as well. Yes, we're gonna check out some Polish food, but I think we're gonna try to eat as much Asian food as possible. Finally, after freaking 3 buses and a freaking Uber, we finally made it to this Korean barbecue place. It is called Koril 180. We were able to order the bachan. The kimchi, honestly, is not that good. But this is very good. And all these little small side ones, the spinach is actually quite good as well. So the seafood soup is actually quite good. It's probably some of the best Korean food I've ever had here. I would give this restaurant, on a scale of 1 to 10, probably like an 8.5. What would you rate it?
9.5.
9.5?
If they would have even more dishes, that would be like a 20.
The only downside, in my opinion, is that it's a little pricey. If you guys come to Wrocław, I would highly recommend coming here. It's just kind of a pain in the butt to find. Just look for the big spire that looks like a wafer cookie. So we're walking around the river right now, and it is popping. There's like a whole entire market. There's like a jazz festival going on. And once the sun comes out, the whole entire vibe switches. The river here is so beautiful, and it feels completely different to how it does in Krakow. Yeah, my friend tells me that there's a lot of German influence here, and you can kind of tell because it feels like a completely different part of Poland. How would you describe this type of architecture? Look at these beautiful buildings, and it's all like more squarish designs. There's a lot of color and a lot of really ornate details that are well maintained on like the doors and everything. The UK is probably the closest comparison I can make. Maybe like Ireland or some places in London. It feels like I'm closer to Western Europe than I am to, you know, Central or Eastern Europe. What's very surprising about the city is the amount of German people that I see everywhere. There are a lot of German people that are here on tourism. Apparently, because this used to be a part of Germany years ago, I think a lot of German people still have like some form of roots here with their ancestors, maybe like 4 or 5 generations ago. Also, there are a ton of Asian people here. I don't know if they are actually living here. I think the Korean population seems to be the biggest because there's Korean food everywhere, but there's also a lot of Asian students. Because it's a university town, it does seem to be like Krakow, a hub for a lot of Asian people. There's more Asian restaurants here you've seen, right? Compared to Krakow? Yeah, way better. So walking around, we stumbled upon this restaurant called Tacos. It's a super small hole-in-the-wall place that's owned by a Mexican guy, but this is some of the best Mexican food that I've actually had here in Poland. If you guys are stopping here in Wrocław, highly recommend this place. He's a Mexican and then she's Polish and then they're married. Yeah. But to me, this reminds me a lot of Lviv, actually. The same colored buildings, the square is very similar. Look at this, wow. spent the last like hour walking around the center of Wrocław, it's beautiful. I would even argue it's a little more beautiful for my taste than Krakow, because I think Krakow has a more of an authentically Polish feel, and it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. The view by the river is super nice, but I like how Wrocław seems to have this kind of like a little more elegant, sophisticated vibe to it. But even around the river, it feels like it's a little more developed. It feels a lot more like Western Europe than it does to Central Eastern Europe. It's a very stark difference to the outside of the city, which is very, very janky, not very developed at all, even though there's a lot of real estate developing now. But I have to say that the downtown here in Wrocław is super beautiful. I don't know if this was a place that I would personally want to live, but to visit for a few days is amazing. So if you take a look at the buildings behind me and the statue right here and this church, just look at it, just how narrow the streets are, design and the architecture and everything. It feels like I'm in the middle of Germany. Look at that. Alright, so the public transportation system here is freaking so confusing. We've gotten lost so many times. Make sure you know exactly where you're going because it's very easy to get lost. You're also gonna see a lot of these gnome figures all around the city. Krakow, they have a bunch of dragons everywhere, but here seems to be about the gnome. The girls here are just as beautiful as anywhere in Poland. Anywhere that you go in Poland, you're gonna find pretty girls, so don't worry about that. So we're waiting for one of the trams and we just stopped at one of the corner bakeries. The pastries aren't like super sweet and they're just delicious. Is that a Polish bakery? Ooh, okay, that's probably why it's so good. I got this little bun thing with Nutella. It was fire. You got a baklava, right? Scale of 1 to 10, what would you give it?
20.
Okay, we are in one of the most famous parks here in Wrocław. It's called Park Szyczniczniki we Wrocławiu. How'd I do? Okay, good. So this park is very, very beautiful. It's interesting because walking around at least this part of town, I have a feeling like I'm back in San Francisco or California or something. The city has so many different vibes depending on where you're at. I think Wrocław, at least the center, is like if Lviv and Germany had a baby. There's a lot of really beautiful architecture here. The buildings are super diverse. Yeah, the more time you spend in Wrocław, the more I really like it. We're walking around a Japanese garden right now, or as they say in Polish, ogród. I went to a lecture here when I was in Krakow. There was a Japanese diplomat that came and visited. He was talking about how Japan and Poland have a very long-standing history. That's why I talk about all the time that there's a lot of crossover between Poland and East Asia. Maybe if you haven't traveled much, you can see these two cultures and think they're actually quite different. But comparatively to the rest of the world, I find that Asian culture and Polish culture share a lot of similarities. Ooh, this is beautiful. Just look at this background. Super beautiful. This park is so nice. And we just sat down for a little bit and enjoyed the view, had a nice little conversation. For one person, entry is like 21 zloty, so it's like $5. I think it's totally worth it if you're here in Wrocław. Right next to the Japanese garden, there's this little fountain area called Hala Stulecia. Hala Stulecia.
Hala Stulecia.
Hala Stulecia.
It's Leviosa.
Look at this beautiful fountain. And even the building in the corner there is really, really nice. There's also certain times in the hour where they play music as well. I don't think they put like lights or anything, but maybe in the nighttime they might put lights on it too, right? There's so many just hidden gems everywhere here in the city. You just keep walking around and you always just stumble onto something. Downtown is way nicer when the sun's out. Yesterday we were walking around here and it was kind of like overcast. Now that the sun's out and you can see all the color in the building and the summer vibes of everything, it feels a lot better. Just the downtown area here in Wrocław is one of the nicest that I've ever seen in Europe, if I'm being completely honest, because it has such a nice mix of so many different things. And the prices are still relatively affordable. In general, I'd say the prices for food and drinks, overall excursions here are not really that bad. I think Krakow is the most tourist-sized city, but honestly, I think Wrocław is a little more beautiful. And I do have to say that it does live up to the hype in certain aspects. The vibe of the city is awesome to visit. I don't know if I feel like home here quite the same way that I do in Krakow. Like Krakow to me is just one of the best cities for living. I just really enjoy the vibe there. I think 2 days here was enough, but if we spend a third day here, it would have been cool as well. It would have been cool to also see some of the aqua parks and maybe catch some of the shows that they have around the city. But I think if you're just walking around, you can see most things within a day. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I have to give Wrocław probably like an 8.5. I think just out of beauty in the city, it's probably like a 9.5 because every time you walk around the city, there's always something new to see. It has some of the best restaurants that I've seen in many cities in Europe. Especially being an Asian person, there's a lot of really good Asian food here, specifically the The Korean food is fantastic. I think you get a really cool experience of what Polish culture is like. But I think some of the outskirts are, I wouldn't say is as consistent, right? The downtown area where most people are gonna go visit if you're a tourist is very, very nice. Like I'm walking around right here, and this kind of reminds me of downtown Athens. It's definitely one of the hidden gems of Poland. I still need to check out Warsaw and Gdańsk. If you're stopping by Poland, I think this is definitely a city worth checking out. For architecture, for culture, for food, Wrocław is a very amazing experience. Overall, definitely worth the visit. Catch y'all later. Peace.